As the administration here in THANET, and so recently, I'm often asked what our purpose would be, particularly post-June the 23rd. It seems to be a popular question amongst media commentators and others. And I suppose my answer is twofold, one to do with Brexit and the other to do with the circumstances here. And that our purpose here has to be different from the Labour and Tory administrations that have gone before us, whose persistent combined messes we keep having to clear up. This statement relates very closely to the first three items on the Leaders' Report this evening, where my role to date, and indeed the Cabinet's role to date, has generally simply been to field the hospital pass given to us by previous administrations. There can be little doubt, to return to Councillor Savage's question from a different direction, that the Pleasure Armour saga of the seafront in Ramsgate is one of the most shining examples of political ineptitude undertaken by a variety of administrations going back to the mid-1990s. Councillor Iris Johnson, in spite of her poor record of decision-making in this council, is still a member of this chamber. As deputy leader in the early years of this century, she oversaw a prospectus for this development hawked around potential investors in the City of London, which included the sale of the freehold from day one. And then spent 13 years denying her intention until in 2015 she achieved her aim with proud newspaper photographs, the Margate councillor who sold Ramsgate seafront. Sold it proudly just 2 months before the election, deservedly threw out her toxic and dysfunctional administration on its ear. Not all smiles, because Councillor Bayford had a little bit of involvement in all this as well, as the man who oversaw the negotiations that admitted to put a stop date on the development contract, creating chaos around sensible negotiation of this for some years, and that should also be noted. As I said, here in THANET, our main purpose has to be different from Labour and Tory, whose persistent combined messes we keep having to clear up. Because then we move on to Dreamland. Compulsory purchased in 2011 under Councillor Bayford. We're fighting the battle on compensation to this day, and you'll see some of it spilled over into the public arena just in the last week or two. Handed on by Councillors Johnson and Hart's crew to a clearly undercapitalised operator, whose vision and understanding of what drives the leisure business seemed to be somewhat short-sighted, nearly as inept as the contract negotiated by Labour on behalf of residents. The end result is a twice insolvent operator in just over a year. Here in THANET, our purpose has to be different from Labour and Tory, whose persistent messes we keep having to clear up. Then there's the local plan. An evidence-based document which officially began in 2011 but is still not complete. The Council must produce this plan to convince planning inspectors there's a good cause for our land use decisions. Currently, the Manston Airport site is purely reserved for aviation, but the airport has been closed for 2 years and we needed to show evidence to maintain that in any emerging plan we could stick with that aviation use only. This was the background to the commissioning of a report on airport viability by specialist consultancy ADIA. ADIA met with both River Oak and Sir Roger Gale to understand their view of the sustainability of freight hub operations at Manston, yet still concluded that airport operations at Manston are very unlikely to be financially viable in the longer term. River Oak have now had 4 chances to impress. They failed as an indemnity partner in 2014, they failed as an indemnity partner in 2015, they failed to take advantage of a city financier who was seeking to invest £150 million and have now failed to demonstrate their case to Avia as well. I am saddened for the campaigners whose battle to maintain their dream of an airport has been both valiant and brave. Manston has an important heritage, but any future for that airport has to be evidenced with real numbers, something River Oak have signally failed to produce to date. Any mixed-use designation does not exclude aviation use. So River Oak need to pull some serious evidence out of the bag in the coming weeks to demonstrate the potential for a working airport. 2 rounds of soft market testing, reports on viability, the lack of interest from recognised players in the aviation marketplace all demand an answer. So it really is time for River Oak to show whether they can or cannot produce a serious business case for an airport. Otherwise, in the words of Tory Chancellor Philip Hammond only a few days ago, when times change, we must change with them. Balancing the books in any council is a challenge. A lethal combination of growing demand, austerity cuts and rising costs makes producing the legally required balanced budget tough. In THANET, a task made harder by some of the decisions that we have inherited, as indicated. In common with many councils, we look to see if there are any assets it would be advantageous to sell to fund our capital programme. The building and improvement works our area so desperately needs. To that end, we held an extraordinary cabinet to open the initial tranche of possible asset disposals, which then undertook a 3-week public consultation before they returned to cabinet for decision. The collective rationale for this list is that virtually all of them are either currently leased or had inquiries for leases, transfers, community or other uses. And therefore we know that there is some market possibility for different ownership. So far so good, one might think. Identify some unused or underused assets to fund other works. Normal business for any landowner with cash flow to manage by funding capital expenditure and reducing maintenance costs at the same time. When into the picture strolls a gentleman called Craig McKinley. Using House of Commons note paper, taxpayer-funded postage and envelopes, stoking the image of fire sales supported by his own invented numbers of 350 flats at Joss Bay. In a sweep of hubris that would shame Pinocchio's nose, our local MP has simply demonstrated his inability to understand genuine public consultation, rather than the pretence that people have been used to before. If we had really wanted to make building use of these sites, then logic says maximise the value by getting planning permission before sale, which of course has not happened because that is not the purpose of the consultation, which genuinely seeks public views. If at the end of the consultation the view is that we should do everything we can to protect the green wedge and farmland, then that is fine. Such an opinion also informs future sites which may be considered. If so, then the question is whether to sell with covenants, which may mean no sale at all if the value becomes less than the agricultural lease rental, and we move on. In reports to Council, we have to make all the options clear. And particularly if we're going to take an option which is less than the greater cash return of development land, we have to show under the Localism Act that residents understand that is what we are doing on their behalf. Because here in Thanet, our purpose must be different from that of Labour and the Tories, whose persistent goodbye messes we keep having to clear up. I would like to have updated you on the Thames Estuary proposals and the 5-council merger, but sadly I've run out of time. The Brett Aggregate extension, worthy of update. We all heard at the last meeting how important the constitutional deadline is to other party leaders, and that only happened this week. Most interesting of all, just yesterday, 2 of the stalwarts of old party politics here in this chamber, one Labour, one Tory, donned ceremonial robes of office to prance around North Down Park, abusing their ceremonial positions in pursuit of political campaigning. One of whom will apparently go to any length to protect any asset in Margate, but devoted many years of her life to selling Ramsgate seafront down to Swanee. That's old politics. Politics which denigrates all our reputations in this chamber. But of course, I can't tell you about it because it happened only yesterday, and the other group leaders could not be given the requisite 5 days' notice, which one of these perpetrators yesterday so strongly advocated as a change to our constitution. The same woman who decried independent members assisting our council because she could not bear to hear them tell the truth. In the constitution of this council, the reputation of this council, the decision making of this council, the legacy of this council, our job is to be different from Labour and the Tories, whose persistent combined messes we are still having to clear up.